Hello, my name is Dr. Scott Young, and today I want to share with you the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war. Coming right up. Now, when you think about Ezekiel, it's a little difficult writing. Now, obviously, it's in the Old Testament. It's about 2,500 years ago. So we're talking, or actually it's longer than that, but about 1,500 years in the Old Testament time frame, or 1,500 BC. And it's hard to read when you catch it. So it takes most scholars a long time to kind of get this through. But I want to share with you we're going to break it down in a quicker level. I go a deeper dive into the second one of my series, Hope in the Last Days. You can look at it on YouTube. Gog, G-O-G, not God, Gog is the leader of the Russians. Now, Gog is a spirit. Now, he's going to be a leader, okay? But he's a spirit that you have to see who he is. And he's a leader of the Russian group. Now, how do you say Russians? Well, that's Magog. That comes from this area directly north from Jerusalem. Now, the others are Muslim nations, and there's a whole group of nations. I don't want to get into them too much, but mostly Muslim nations in there. So they go south to Jerusalem to make war. Now, I want you to kind of think back here. A king would set off with set his armies and a general off like Gog. Just think of General Gog for a second. And he sends him off with requests. And he says, you do this and you do that, and here's my signet ring, and there you go, and go do it, okay? How would he know what's going to happen? It might take him a year before he comes back. But the reality is, in Ezekiel actually indicates something. I think it's in verse 6 or 8. And what it says, Ezekiel 38, it says that, have you come down to make war and to steal the profits of the land? Wait, that's called intentions. I want you to understand that it's actually indicating satellite and cell phone conversations. This could be potentially like the UN or some other type of group or body communicating back and saying, hey, wait, what are you doing down there? Do you see how amazing those verses are? In any other time frame, they wouldn't make any sense. But from the 1970s on, when we had satellite communication and satellite ability to see what was happening, it's the first time we could know the intentions of an army from a distance. But then they run into three things. They first run into an earthquake in the mountains east of Israel. So just right outside of Israel, there's a mountain range out there. And there's a pretty big earthquake. This is not the big, great Wrath of the Lamb earthquake where it destroys everything. But this is the first of actually 3 earthquakes in the tribulation time frame. But it's a small earthquake. And then there's this really weird thing about a confused army that starts to kill one another. That's actually a later shadow of an event that happened in the Old Testament. In 2 Chronicles 20, Jehoshaphat sees this army of 7 times bigger people. And he prays and he puts the singers in the front line, and the singers start praising God. And then the army starts fighting against one another. He's just watching it going, whoa. And then they just go up and clean up the spoils. It's the same kind of thing that happens to those Muslim and Russian countries. The third one talks about an incredible thing I would call a nuclear explosion. There's flesh ripped off of them and all these other amazing things that I would say that there's a nuclear explosion. So you've got an earthquake, a natural event, a unnatural, wacky spiritual thing. that no one can really get. They're like, what kind of weapon does Israel have? And thirdly, it ends up with this nuclear event that everyone would know that Israel does have nuclear weapons. And here's the fascinating thing. It keeps saying in Ezekiel 39 that the world would know that I am God and I'm taking care of the Jews. Atheism is gonna die. The whole world's gonna get it, and no one's gonna stick with atheism anymore. They're gonna believe in some God. It says that they won't be able to bury the dead for 7 months. They'll put markers out and around the graves or the possible areas where those dead are. Let me just put it another way. If you had a tactical nuclear weapon that went off, it's about 6 months before you could go in and safely take care of those people. Wow, 7 months to bury the dead? That matches up perfectly with a tactical nuclear weapon. It also indicates that there will be 7 years that the Jews will be able to come in and take the spoils of the people. It says the fuel. It could be all of those weapons that are utilized and the fuel that comes with it. I mean, jet fuel and all kinds of other things. And that's why it has to be pre-tribulation. It can't happen in the middle, because if you happen in the middle, then they would be in the millennial reign. They don't need weapons and war and all that other stuff. It can't happen afterward. It has to be pre-tribulation. Now, Gog dies in the desert. Some people say, is Gog the Antichrist? No, Antichrist comes later, okay? But what's really weird is that Gog actually resurrects. Now, not in the same way. It's the spirit of the guy, okay? This spirit, this bad spirit who's trying to kill millions of people, gets millions of people killed on his own watch. He actually shows up in the last tiny bit, of the millennial reign of Christ, where Jesus it allows Satan to come out of the abyss, and he gets all jiggy on the world, and Gog shows up to try to create a mess again. So Gog is a warring type of spirit too. Now, here's the fascinating thing. It also ends in the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war that there are fireballs hitting the Russian cities along the coastline. Fireballs. That's got to be an ICBM. It is so amazing, because fireballs from any other time frame could never have been affected until World War II, where we had an ICBM types. The V1, the V2 rockets were unbelievable technologies. Now, the Antichrist is that man to come, but that has nothing to do with the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war. And I'll just leave you with this point. Every time the Jews are taken over or attacked in any way, they always get even. They've always done it throughout their history. They get even, especially from 1948 on. And here's the funny thing. The Antichrist has to create a peace treaty. Peace treaties normally have to come when you have a war first. Now, wait a second. If you have a war, the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, you have the Antichrist who has to create a peace treaty with who? Israel. It's the perfect setup for the Antichrist to create a peace treaty. So now you have a little understanding about it. We will talk about it much more in the Hope in the Last Day series. Thank you so much.